The morning rush outside Hale Enterprises was routine, until one desperate scream shattered it all. A young black boy standing by the employee parking lot yelled, "Don't get in the car!" His mother, Marcia, a quiet cleaner known only by her first name, froze in confusion as her boss, the company's powerful CEO, turned to look. Within seconds, the sound of an engine roared, tires screeched, and chaos unfolded. Phones dropped, people screamed, and what happened next would expose secrets buried beneath the company's polished glass image. Marcia had worked in that building for nearly a decade. Every morning before sunrise, she arrived long before the executives, cleaning offices that sparkled with other people's dreams. Her son Elijah often waited quietly in a corner of the lobby before school, sketching in his notebook while his mother polished marble floors. They were invisible to most, part of the background noise of success. Yet Marcia carried quiet pride in her work, and a deeper hope that her son would one day rise far above the life she knew. Hale Enterprises was a monument to ambition, glass walls, polished steel, and a CEO who built an empire from nothing. Richard Hale was a visionary, admired for his speeches about equality and opportunity. But behind the interviews and awards lay whispers, stories of selective compassion, of decisions that looked good in headlines but felt hollow in practice. That morning, Marcia was cleaning near the executive parking lot, humming softly, when Elijah tugged her sleeve. He seemed uneasy, eyes locked on a black sedan idling in the corner. Its tinted windows and faint exhaust made him anxious. Marcia brushed it off, thinking it belonged to a visiting executive. But when Richard appeared moments later, walking toward that same car, Elijah's heart pounded. Something in the air felt wrong, almost electric. And then, he screamed. The blast shook the ground, sending flames and glass into the air. The CEO's car exploded just seconds before he reached it. The boy's instinct had saved a man's life. In the chaos that followed, no one noticed the quiet courage of the cleaner's son. Within hours, police surrounded the building, and the media swarmed outside. "Attempted car bombing at Hale Enterprises," the headlines read. But behind closed doors, the mood shifted. When security reviewed footage and saw Elijah shouting before the explosion, suspicion fell on the very family who had saved the CEO. Marcia was dragged into questioning, her voice trembling as she explained her son had simply felt something was wrong. But no one listened. The officers looked at her not as a mother, but as a suspect. One even joked about the kind of neighborhoods where bombs come easy. Humiliation burned inside her chest. Meanwhile, Richard sat in his private office, shaken but curious. He watched the footage himself, again and again, trying to understand. The boy had looked not at the car, but at someone inside it seconds before the blast. There had been a driver dressed like company security, but reports claimed the car was empty. That contradiction gnawed at him. When he asked for a full investigation, his own security chief, Mark Jensen, urged him to let it go. "You've been through enough, sir," he said, voice too smooth, too calm. But something in Richard's gut twisted. Later, he pushed past the resistance and ordered to see Marcia himself. He found her in a small back office, hands trembling, eyes red from tears. Elijah sat silently beside her, holding her hand. The same people who praised her in press releases had treated her like a criminal. Richard felt a wave of guilt. He had built this company, but he hadn't built fairness. That night, as the building emptied, Richard replayed the video again. This time, he saw something everyone else had missed. A reflection in the car window. It was faint, but the face was unmistakable. Mark Jensen, his own head of security. The man who had cleared the car that morning. The realization struck hard. This wasn't random. Someone had tried to kill him, and that someone worked inside his walls. Mark had been reprimanded before, accused of harassing black employees and covering it with charm. HR had quietly buried the reports, calling him old school. Now Richard finally saw what old school truly meant. He bypassed his team and called the police directly. Within hours, Mark disappeared, his access revoked, his records frozen. But before his arrest could be made, an anonymous email arrived in Richard's inbox. Clean up your mess or more people will get hurt. The company doesn't belong to them. The message chilled him to his core. This wasn't one man's hatred. It was a network. People inside his company who despised change, who believed progress was a threat. While investigators filled the building, Marcia sat quietly in the lobby, still trembling. When Richard approached, she couldn't meet his eyes. But Elijah did. The boy looked up and asked softly, "You listened?" And Richard nodded, realizing the truth, that the child he once ignored had seen what no one else would. By evening, the world learned that the attack was an inside job. The media praised the CEO's leadership under fire, but Richard knew better. The real hero was the boy whose instinct and humanity had saved him. In the days that followed, Hale Enterprises was turned inside out. The investigation exposed years of discrimination hidden under polished policies and corporate smiles. Several senior executives resigned. Internal emails revealed how deeply racism had rooted itself in the company's structure. Marcia and Elijah were cleared of all suspicion, but their trust was gone. Then, one morning, a letter arrived at their apartment. Richard had written it himself, an invitation for Marcia to return, not as a cleaner, but as a staff community liaison, tasked with reshaping the company's culture. At first, she hesitated. Change, she knew, often ended at the surface. But when Elijah reminded her of how her voice had finally been heard, she decided to go back, not as invisible labor, but as the voice of those who had been overlooked. Weeks later, Richard stood before his employees, with Marcia beside him. He didn't talk about the explosion or the investigation. He spoke about blindness, the kind that lets people see profits and prestige but not humanity. "A company isn't measured by its success," he said, "but by how it treats the people it thinks no one will notice." The room fell silent. For the first time, everyone looked at the woman beside him not as a worker, but as a symbol of truth. Elijah sat in the front row, his small notebook in hand, smiling as his mother's name echoed across the hall. Outside, the world framed it as a redemption story. But for Marcia, it wasn't about headlines. It was about dignity. She had lived long enough in the shadows. Now her story, and her son's voice, had brought the truth to light. Because sometimes the power to change everything doesn't come from wealth or influence. It comes from the courage of those the world refuses to see.